Hey there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of Pastatime with this scary-ish podcast.
Woo!
Robin Grace, this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
And we're here to read you folks some creepypasta from across the web.
Indeed we are. Pretty excited about this. If any of you folks out there, you wonderful listeners and viewers, have suggestions for creepypastas that you would like to hear, or if you have your own creepypasta you would like to send to us, as one of them will be tonight, written by a spooky friend, you can reach out to us by emailing pastatime@scarish.com, or you can go to our website, scarish.com, and click on Contact Us, fill out that form. That comes directly to us. I think you actually read this part normally. You can also feel free to hit us up on all social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagrams, those things. So, fun stuff. Robin, are you excited for this episode?
Yeah, I am excited for this episode, so we'll see how it goes.
Cool. So I am going to be going first when it comes to the Pastatimes. I'm going to be reading one that was heavily requested from some of the folks in the Spooky Friends group and also in our Discord. I've also seen this one posted in a lot of people's top 5 list as I'm going through the internet and trying to figure out which ones are going to be my jam, so to speak. So this one is very short, and then my next one will be longer than that. So I'm going to be reading The Portraits, which I've heard good things about, and it goes a little something like this. There was a hunter in the woods who, after a long day hunting, was in the middle of an immense forest. It was getting dark, and having lost his bearings, he decided to head in one direction until he was clear of the increasingly oppressive foliage. After what seemed like hours, he came across a cabin in a small clearing. Realizing how dark it had grown, he decided to see if he could stay there for the night. He approached and found the door ajar. Nobody was inside. The hunter flopped down on the single bed, deciding to explain himself to the owner in the morning. As he looked around the inside of the cabin, he was surprised to see the walls adorned with several portraits, all painted in incredible detail. Without exception, they appeared to be staring down at him, their features twisted into looks of hatred and malice. Staring back, he grew increasingly uncomfortable. Making a concerted effort to ignore the many hateful faces, he turned to face the wall, and exhausted, he fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, the hunter awoke. He turned, blinking in unexpected sunlight. Looking up, he discovered that the cabin had no portraits, only windows.
That's terrifying.
That's the end of it.
So it's just creepy people, creepy creatures looking in?
Correct.
Wow.
So not much description on what they were, except that they had looks of hatred and malice. So one of those things that kind of lets you picture whatever your own demons would be looking in at you.
Yeah.
So I read that one, I was like, I totally get why people like this one, although I have so many questions.
It's pretty straightforward, pretty creepy. It's like, you think one thing, oh, no, it's absolutely nothing, like, simple as a portrait, though a moving portrait would be really creepy.
Yeah, have you seen those videos of people that have like what looks to be like a painting, they're like really nice paintings,
yeah, and then they change into super creepy things.
Yeah, they start like terrifying people. Those are kind of funny, but they always seem really fake. Like there's one of some chick who's like putting like IKEA furniture together, and her boyfriend leaves the room, and he's the one who like planned the prank. Yeah, and she gets freaked out, but you can tell she totally knew what was going on. So those are really funny. But that's what reminded me of this. So right on, good stuff. Good way to start out the show.
All right, so I'm going to read my first story that I picked. I was very excited to actually picked my stories last night and not today. So my first story is called The Doors, and it goes, I'm a first-year resident at the local hospital, so I often work long hours and I'm always sleep-deprived. I do make decent money, if not nearly as much as a licensed doctor. Impressive. But on account of student loans, I live in a crappy apartment. The bedroom of this apartment is tiny, and the only spot for my dresser is immediately to the right of the entrance. It's just a bit too long for the space, so the door only opens halfway before it starts pressing against the corner of the dresser, and it makes an awful splintering noise when you've gone too far. This happened often enough my first month here that I've already left some big dimples in the wood. Outside, the bathroom is down the hall on the left and the living room to the right. The hallway is just wide enough for the bedroom door, with a couple of inches leeway on either side for the frame. Why is this important? Well, about 2 weeks ago, the door to my bedroom moved. I'm not sure how else to describe it. I'd just worked my second 30-hour shift in 3 days, and on 4 hours of sleep, I was getting up for another one. When I pulled open the bedroom door, something struck me as off, and it took me a minute to realize what it was. The door had opened completely. I looked to see what had happened, discovering that while my dresser was still flush against both walls, there was an extra inch of space between the dresser and the door. I shrugged, chalked it up to some fluke of the apartment walls, and proceeded down the hall to a shower before heading into work. When I got home 30 hours later, exhausted and desperate for sleep, the door was pushing against the dresser, same as always. Nothing unusual happened for a couple of days, but on Thursday morning I was going out for another long shift when the door opened even wider. It looked like the doorway had shifted even further left, far enough that I could see a half-inch of the hallway sticking out beyond the door frame. So it's like the door and the opening of the door, and then you can see the wall.
Right, like where the door actually is shifting slowly.
Yeah. It was as though the contractor had miscalculated when he built the place, slightly displacing the doorway from the hall. An inch more, and I'd have been able to see insulation and wiring. I stared at that sliver of drywall for a few minutes, dumbfounded, while my mind tried to come up with some rational explanations. The building was old, settling, and this was just the result of natural wall tensions easing. This disjunction had been there this whole time, and I'd been too busy or too tired to notice. I'd slept through an earthquake during which my room got displaced a couple of inches from the hall. Fuck.
That's my favorite Dr. Seuss book, by the way.
From the wall. Wait, shit, I don't know. Anyway.
To the window, to the wall.
Till the sweat drips down my balls.
Correct.
During which my room got displaced a couple of inches from the hall. All of the explanations seemed plausible. With work coming up in half an hour, I really just wanted to get some coffee and get out of there, so I decided to call the super after I got off. However, when I got home the next morning, the door was back to normal, and I was tired enough to not even care. Everything was ordinary the next day, too. Then on Saturday, I was headed to the hospital again, when I found that although my door only opened halfway, grinding against the dresser as usual, the hallway itself, I know, I was trying to get past it. The hallway itself had shifted a good foot. The entire wall and then some was clearly visible. To the left of the wall, where I should have been looking into my bathroom, there was this black inch-wide gap. The light from my room only went a couple of inches into that shadowy space, but I could see a floor that looked to be made of concrete, smooth, featureless, and gray. Just like my soul. This musty smell emanated from inside, like from an old, dry basement, or maybe an attic that had been left untouched for too long. My first instinct was to just close the door. Clearly, this was a hallucination brought on by working too many hours with too little sleep. But the doorknob clattered against solid drywall. My door wouldn't close. Confused and more than a little disturbed, I initially thought to just leave. Get the hell out of there, worry about the details later. The need for a rational explanation, however, coupled with a morbid sense of curiosity, kept me from bolting out the front door. I called out of work for the first time in almost a year, saying that a pipe had burst in my apartment and that I needed to let the repairman in to fix it. Next, I called the super and asked him to come by. Then, while waiting for him to arrive, I shined a flashlight into that sliver of space. No! Why?
Why not? You don't have the morbid curiosity or you would want to see into this?
Nope. Not even a little. I'd have been out of there. Fuck that. There wasn't much to see. The area ended at a cinder block wall, roughly where my hallway turned, and although I was blocked from seeing how far the room extended to the left, I got the impression that it was big, maybe bigger than my entire apartment. Even if I was wrong, though, the fact remained that there was a strange space where my bathroom was clearly supposed to be. I even looked to be sure. Everything looked perfectly ordinary from my bathroom. You leaned forward. I didn't know if you were going to say something.
I was going to say, it reminds me of that video that someone posted in the Spooky Friends
where
group.
They found the thing behind their mirror.
An entire unit behind their mirror.
Yeah,
that's super. And it wasn't just like a little sliver in the drywall. It was a full hole behind their mirror that led to an entire unit.
It's just like Candyman.
Yeah, it's super creepy.
I'm not saying it 2 more times. Anyway.
You're not saying it into a mirror, so except I am seeing you over here. So maybe not.
Okay.
Just to be safe.
The super arrived
Candyman. Okay, that's 2 for me, 1 for you. Okay, keep going.
The super arrived less than half an hour later, but in the time it took for me to answer the door and escort him back to my room, everything had gone back to normal. As you can imagine, I got pretty agitated, even frantic. However, when the super saw how upset I was, he actually asked me outright whether or not the walls seemed to be moving on their own. All right. While I gaped at him, he explained that the previous tenant, a young woman who had also worked at the hospital,
interesting,
had complained to him about something similar. She had claimed that the wall sometimes extended an inch or more past the frame of the doorway, but whenever he came to investigate, nothing was out of the ordinary. The young woman eventually became hysterical, on the verge of moving out, but at his suggestion took a leave of absence from the hospital instead. After that, there'd been no more complaints. She stayed until her lease was up and then left without incident. The super gave me a sympathetic look after he told me this story and asked whether I had been working particularly long hours recently or perhaps also felt trapped by my work schedule.
That's kind of, I don't know, that's just half-ass investigating by this super here.
Yeah. I mean, what could I say to that? I agreed with him, informed him that I would be taking a break from work as well, and apologized for wasting his time. The super was cool about it since I guess he had experience with this sort of thing, and even said that he was glad to help, that the hospitals work us residents too hard. After he left, I called work to let them know I'd be out tomorrow as well, and then decided to turn in early to make up for lost sleep. It was nearly midnight when I awakened. I had been dreaming about something. I don't remember what it was, but it must have been a nightmare because I woke up with this sense of utter dread washing over me. It was like when you're alone in the early hours of the morning, silence hanging over your room like a sheet, and out of nowhere you get the feeling that someone is in the room with you. I never get that feeling, so I don't know.
I mean, I've gotten that feeling, but it's not like, oh yeah, how you wake up in the middle of the night and feel that all the time.
Yeah.
Nah, dog.
So you get this feeling that someone's in the room with you, standing behind you, watching you. That was the feeling I had upon waking up in the stillness of my bedroom at midnight. And then I heard the scratching.
I looked over to your screen and I saw that one line and I was like, oh shit, it's going to escalate.
It was faint at first, so faint that I thought I was imagining it, but gradually it grew in volume until it was clearly audible from across the room. Something was scratching at my bedroom door. That itself shouldn't have been so alarming. I'd had mouse troubles at the apartment before. I'd even heard them scratching at the walls at odd hours of the night. After the events of the previous days, however, the sound jolted me awake, that sense of dread deepening into real fear. I slowly got out of bed and tiptoed toward my door. Up close, the sound was unmistakable. The scratching was coming from the bottom of the other side. Mouse or not, I reached over and quietly as I could locked the door. Then I grabbed the flashlight from the top of my dresser, got onto my hands and knees, and shined it through the half-inch space underneath the door. That is some Signs stuff. It's an alien. Don't look.
Well, I mean, he does manage to cut off its fingers, though. Spoilers for Signs. It's like 20 years old, but he doesn't take the worst of it in that exchange, so maybe they're going to be okay.
We'll see. The scratching stopped almost immediately. Then something reached in through the bottom of the door. I was so startled that for a minute I didn't even realize what it was, and then it felt like someone had punched me in the gut. 3 fingertips curled against the bottom of my door frame, wriggling slightly as though trying to push the door open. The fingers were gray and skeletally thin, stained the rusty brown any medical student could tell was dried blood. Their nails were long and ragged, clearly broken numerous times, with the splitting and pitting characteristics of malnutrition. And then I heard something else coming from just outside, carried on that musty, dry basement smell. "Help me." The voice was so soft as if to be barely audible, but it was clearly a woman, and I could hear panic running through it, quiet sobs underneath the words, and then I could hear something else, a sound like soft footsteps approaching from somewhere far away, and all the while the voice continued, whispering, never growing any louder but getting more urgent, more rapid. "Help me, please. Please, please help me. It's coming. Please help me. Please help me. Please help me. Please, it's coming. It's coming. Please, 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 please." And then the fingers vanished, as though whomever they belonged to had been violently jerked away. I could hear the sound of something being dragged along the ground, something scraping frantically against the concrete, but that noise quickly faded into the distance.
Jesus Christ, dude.
And then I heard the soft sound of footsteps approaching again. It stopped outside my door, and for a while there was only silence. Then, as I watched by trembling light of my flashlight, the lock slowly began to turn. Somehow, it was being unlocked from the other side. I jumped up and slammed my shoulder against the door, dropping my flashlight in my haste, and scrambled to lock the door again. Something resisted my frenzied attempts to turn that little dial, and my fingers were so sweaty that they kept slipping off. I believe that 100%. Before I finished turning the lock, the knob twisted in my grip, and whatever was back there hit the door hard enough that the whole thing shuddered. Raw terror flooded my system, and I pushed back as hard as I could. My body leaned almost parallel to the ground, even as I continued fumbling with the lock. Whatever it was hit the door again, harder this time, such that it actually opened for a split second. Oh, fuck. I was almost sobbing at this point, but my bare feet found purchase on the linoleum floor, and I shoved back with all my strength, somehow slamming the door back closed. At the same time, my fingers were finally able to wrap themselves around the lock and turn it. Using the time that bought me, I ran to my dresser and dragged it in front of the door, then sat down with my back against it. The pounding continued, even more strongly than before, but with my dresser in the way, the door stayed closed. After a few minutes, it simply stopped, and there was another minute or two of silence before the soft sound of footsteps finally moved away.
Call the police, man.
Yeah, call the freaking police! Still, I continued sitting in front of the dresser, back braced against it, too terrified to even think of opening the door or heading back to bed.
Or calling the police.
The only window in my bedroom was too small to climb through, and I'd left my phone on the kitchen counter. Fuck. There was nothing to do but sit and wait, which I did until the grayish light coming through my window announced the arrival of morning. It took me a while to finally muster the courage to push the dresser aside, and even then I just stood there for a few minutes staring at the doorknob. In the end, the need to know overcame the fear of the unknown. No!
Okay, at this point, that's just a foolish decision. Just scream until someone helps you, for God's sake.
And I pulled the door open just a crack. My hallway sat outside, same as always, with no sign that anything was unusual. Even the other side of the door was pristine, with no evidence that any violence had been directed toward it during the evening. With the door halfway open, pressing against the dresser as usual, I slipped outside the bedroom and into the hallway, heart pounding even though I was already doubting my own mind. Could it all have been just a nightmare? Had I suffered a psychotic episode in the middle of the night, terrified of nothing more than a mouse scratching at my bedroom door? Did I spend the entire night camped out in front of my dresser on account of a hallucination? As I stood there, doubting, I let my bedroom door close behind me and my nostrils filled with that dusty basement smell. I ran. I took off into the hallway, practically clawing against the wall as I dashed for the living room and tore the front door open. When I got there, just before I launched myself outside, I heard the splintering noise of my bedroom door pressing against the back corner of my dresser. Oh man, it's been over a week. I haven't gone back, not for my things, my clothes, nothing. I'm crashing on a friend's living room couch instead. He brings me takeout when he comes home from work. I extended my leave of absence from the hospital, citing a death in the family. I tried finding the woman that used to live in my apartment, the previous tenant that had also complained about the moving walls, but her address forwarding had long since expired. Searching for her by name turned up no results. Not on any social networking site, nor search engine, nor people finder. The super didn't know any of her friends or family. I even checked the FBI's missing persons page with no luck. I hope she's out there somewhere, merely beyond my ability to find. But I have nightmares every night. Ones in which those emaciated fingers and that soft pleading voice reach out to me from a dark, endless space. Still, I insist that every door in the apartment stays open, because the last time I opened the front door, there was a tiny cross-section of wall exposed as though the doorway had been displaced a half-inch from its usual spot. So even at this other apartment, it happened.
This thing is after her. That's super terrifying.
That's super terrifying. And, oh, God, it just reminds me of that. I always talk about this Japanese legend about the crevices. So this thing lives in any crack. And so any crack, it just comes out and gets you.
It's terrifying, dude.
But credit to Dispater, who's the one that wrote this story, I guess.
That's excellent. Yeah. I can understand why that one's well-renowned.
Yeah.
It's really, really, really good. That's just super terrifying, too. So, yeah. Enjoy your nightmares, folks.
Yeah.
So before we move into our next story, we are going to take a really quick commercial break. And we're back. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get into my second creepypasta of the show. This one came from spooky friend Vivian. It was the first one that was ever sent to us, which was originally written for the show. So thank you so much for sending it. Its subject is Creepypasta for Pastatime, What Happened on the Mountain. So I have not read this per se. I've skimmed it to make sure there's nothing incredibly inappropriate in here. It looks to be all good.
No nudes?
Didn't see any nudes, thank God. And I did not see anything that was like over the top with any sort of content that I thought would need a trigger warning, basically, is what I was searching for. So let's go ahead and jump into it. What happened on the mountain? Only I know. They called it an accident. After all, that's what I told them, but I know better. I know that they aren't prepared to hear the truth, and if I told them, I'd end up in the nut house.
Okay. I'm just, like, expecting people to go missing in the mountains because they see something, you know what I mean? Like they went hiking or something?
Yeah, we're about to find out. So I write to you now before I disappear. I can't hold it in any longer, and they can't get me if they don't know me. So here it is. The story of what really happened on the mountain. In 2014, me and 3 friends went up to the mountain. I wonder what mountain it is. We planned to go.
It's a fake story.
We planned to go for 2 days. Details, babe. Details. Devil's in the details. We planned to go for 2 days. Me, my best friend David, his brother Evan, and Evan's girlfriend Molly all drove up together in Evan's minivan. We packed light. I was never a fan of the wilderness. Too much could go wrong. So much danger. Bears, moose, coyotes, wolves, cougars, and mountain lions. All for what? To take a shit in the woods? No thanks. It's funny to look back and think that bears and moose were my biggest problems. Not to mention what I thought were the scariest things that could be lurking in those woods, because as much as the police will try to convince you otherwise, it wasn't a bear, and it wasn't a wolf, and it wasn't a coyote, and it sure as hell wasn't human either. Trust me, I did my research. There is not, nor has there ever been, a beast in our area as big as what I saw that night that can move that fast. And that shriek. To this day, I'm still not sure if the yowl came from the creature or Molly.
That's
poor
creepy.
Molly.
Oh, no, I'm just thinking of the rat from Solar Opposites.
I know, when I saw Molly, I thought of the rat from Solar Opposites too. The wall. They really need to make a wall series. Okay, we're going to keep moving. Anyways, we reach a point on the trail where we have to park the van and walk the rest of the way. After hiking for about an hour, we find a nice-sized clearing perfect for our tents. We set up our 2 tents and sleeping bags. Me and David in one tent, Evan and Molly in the other. Evan and David go off to collect some firewood, and me and Molly start to make a stone circle. The stone circle is almost complete when the boys come back with some logs and kindle for a soon-to-be campfire to feed on. The fire is up and going just in time for the sun to set. We do all the basic cheesy camping bullshit like roasting s'mores and telling creepy stories. And Molly was in the middle of her entrancing story about a cannibal who ate babies when we heard a blood-curdling scream. Our eyes darted towards the direction it came from, but we saw nothing. David and Evan stood up, grabbed their flashlights, looked at me and Molly and said, "Stay here. We're going to check out what made that noise."
Don't split up.
Pretty sure I'd be like, "We're getting in the car and leaving."
And are about when they split up.
And are about to head into the darkness when I realize what idiots they're being. What in the goddamn fuck do you think you're doing? Have you never seen a horror movie, or did you hit your head when you were little? Because splitting up when something creepy happens is the fastest way to get us all killed, I exclaimed in disbelief. Divide and conquer. We can cover more ground this way, Evan tries to explain. Bullshit, we're stronger as a group, Molly declares. Besides, we don't know what's waiting for us in these woods.
Molly, the only one with a brain.
Well, it's Molly and the narrator, who has not given their name. In fact, we shouldn't be going at all. It was hard to ignore how much sense and reason was in these cold, hard facts she was spitting. Molly, someone could be hurt. They may need our help. You can't just expect me to leave them there, Evan reasoned. Like the person in the last story who left the person out in the hallway. Which is all the more reason we should be going with you, I concluded. And of course, they let us come. Maybe it was the fact that Molly controlled Evan's sex life, or maybe they realized that if something bad were to happen, we would be the voices of sanity. But either way, they caved, and we grabbed our flashlights, we grabbed heavy sticks, and walked towards the noise we heard. We walked in a straight line so we wouldn't lose our way. As we walked, we called out to see if anyone needed help. We stayed close together, not only so no one would get lost, but also for warmth. Aside from the crunch of our footsteps on dead leaves and twigs, the thousands of crickets rubbing their legs together like I do on my sheets when I have freshly shaved legs, and of course our calls out into the empty darkness, it was quiet. But every once in a while I thought I heard something jumping from tree to tree following us from the branches above. It would have to be small, for it to be like, did I hear that? Because even the predator made noise. Something big.
What did the predator sound like?
I mean, it sounded very noisy when it jumped from tree to tree because it shakes the tree. Something big, and I can't do the clicking sound when it's like...
We tried.
Something big. I figured it was just my imagination. After all, I was the only one who seemed to notice. Sorry, I'm just like, every Predator meme and catchphrase just ran through my brain. I'm like, these people need to get to the chopper. We walked for maybe 5 minutes before deciding that it was pointless and cold to keep walking towards nothing. Thankfully, we found our site just as the fire was turning to embers and decided to call it a night. Me and David talked as we tried to fall asleep. He fell asleep after about 10 minutes from us saying goodnight. I, however, was less fortunate. I tossed and turned and tossed some more before deciding that sleep was for the weak. I stared up at the tent ceiling, just barely able to see the stars through the fabric. I zoned out into this thin veil of what I guess you could call sleep, slipping in and out of consciousness, where minutes go by in seconds and you're not sure if you're actually ever falling asleep. This soon turned into a strange paralysis after the darkness in the tent and the barely visible stars turned into a shadow that raced across the top of my tent without a sound. I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't blink, and I couldn't do anything to stop the tears from rolling down the side of my face as the shadow morphed into a solid figure. It moved out of my line of sight but remained in my limited peripheral as I saw the figure move towards the direction of Molly and Evan's tent. From what I could make out, the beast was tall with sharp horns on each side of its head, and its body was adorned with big hawk-like wings. A sound of fabric being ripped and a shriek like I've never heard before.
Oh, it's getting them.
I didn't want to know what happened next, so I looked back to the ceiling, and then I could move again. I let out a quiet gasp, and even though I could move again, I didn't want to. I probably stayed as still as a statue for about 20 minutes before I was sure the beast was gone.
I'd be afraid to move if
I
that
would
were
too.
me, like, big ol' nope.
I sat up and almost passed out from what I saw next to me. David, or what was left of him, was in pieces, laying in a pool of his own blood, missing an ear. Stifling back tears and a scream, I climbed through the large hole ripped in the tent door and didn't even need to open Evan and Molly's tent to see that they had met the same fate as David.
Oh my god.
Quiet as a mouse and as scared as one too, I gathered the items I could salvage from the destruction of our campsite and I left. I'd be in that car and fucking
Yeah, I wouldn't
gone.
even. What is there to scavenge? Grab your phone, grab your purse, leave. Or bag.
I mean, if you
Backpack.
hate the woods that much, what reason is there to scavenge anything in that moment and just get the fuck out? Barefoot, scared, alone in the woods, leaving behind 3 dead bodies. I remembered the minivan and thought I could try and find it and escape into civilization that way, but the thought struck that Evan had the keys, and I didn't really want to search my dead friend's corpse to steal his car. As terrifying as the dark woods are with your friends, they are 100 times scarier on your own, especially when you are running from something. I jumped at every twig I heard snap, every owl hoot, and I swear I could hear a second set of footsteps behind my own. Everything is so much louder at night, or maybe the sounds of all of the things that aren't you are just amplified.
I mean, you did just see your friends get murdered. Everything probably is like you got adrenaline pumping.
Everything is amplified,
You can just hear everything, yeah.
Maybe my imagination was just fucking with me, but I knew in the back of my head that I need to run when I heard the dull thud of something large fall, or land, I should say, from the trees above, right behind me. And so I did. I ran and ran until my body gave up and I collapsed on a nearby tree. The sun was just barely peeking out from above the horizon in a golden sliver as the sky got brighter, and I curled up into a ball and cried. Something killed my friends, and for some reason it spared me, but maybe after it realized its mistake, it decided to hunt me down. Why couldn't I have just died with the rest of them? The sun finally rose up fully above the horizon, and the sky got blue. I sat up and felt sick, like really sick. And sure enough, I threw up the s'mores from the last night and the dinner we got on the way up here and the lunch I ate before we started the drive and a human ear.
No.
Wait, that wasn't on the
Were
menu.
you the bad guy
I
all
continued to
along?
vomit up more body parts such as a nose, a couple fingers, and what looked to be part of a tongue. I eventually started dry heaving and had to calm myself down and just remind myself that I have to breathe to keep living. What happened last night? Whose body parts are these, and why were they in my stomach?
You ate your friends!
Avi. To be honest, I still don't have the answers to these questions. In fact, parts of the rest of the story are a bit blurry, but what I'm assuming happened is I continued walking until I found the main road and hitchhiked into town. From there, I called the police and told them an altered version of what happened, something along the lines of, we were camping, I got up to pee, a bear found our camp, killed my friends, and left by the time I got back. I came back, panicked, and ran. I was a young girl in my early 20s, and as they had nothing to prove otherwise, they moved on, minimal questions asked. We held funerals, and I was in the news for quite some time, being the only survivor of the, quote, wild animal attack that killed 3 people and left me completely unharmed, but over time, after one too many no comments, They found other, more interesting cases and moved on. I moved away, trying to escape the nightmares and questions and weird looks from just about everyone. People I knew and strangers. I couldn't stand the pity and suspicion from people that can't even begin to comprehend what actually transpired. So just like that night, I ran. I tried to live my life normally. I got a house, a girlfriend, a stable job. I've made a life for myself. But now I'm back. I told my girlfriend I was going home for a few days, and now I'm back. The memories of that night have haunted me for too long, and my questions will no longer be left unanswered. So I'm back, and going back to this godforsaken mountain for the truth. The truth of what really happened on the mountain.
No! Why would you go back? Why?
This is triggering a lot of stuff in Robin right now, which is so funny to see.
It's just, why? Why go back? Just live your life. Yeah, you had everything, nice set up. It was
They're
good.
Clearly the monster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
100%. They're going to go back. This is the second installment where they accidentally kill a bunch of camp counselors this time. So, yeah. It's good stuff. Thank you for sending that in, Vivian. I very much enjoyed it. What I'm going to be doing this weekend, I don't think we have anything crazy going on. I'm going to be updating the website where I'm going to have a spot for folks to have their own stories live. Kind of like our own little creepypasta corner, so to speak. And once that's updated, yours will be up there first as one that we actually read on the show. And then when I update the site to get fully up to date for the Pastatime episodes, I will link to all the stories that we read, and this one will direct to that page for you. So thank you one more time for sending that in. We sincerely appreciate it.
Okay, so this is the final story of the episode?
Indeed it is.
Yes, so this is the final story. It's called The Portal in the Woods. It goes, Dad, you said you'd play catch with me, I yelled as my father walked past me to his office, where he spent most of his days when he wasn't at work. Sorry, bud, I gotta get these documents done for tomorrow's big meeting. We'll do it another day, okay? I frowned. That was the same excuse he always gave me, and the same follow-up he always had. We'll do it another day. Yeah, sure we will, I thought. The longer I stood in front of his door, the more upset I became. I eventually huffed and puffed enough to the point where I stormed out of the house. I left for my go-to place when I was upset, the treehouse. To a 12-year-old kid, a treehouse was the perfect place for a kid to just get away from his problems and be a kid. It was Reese's and my place to go when we were sad, mad, or just bored out of our minds. It was our little getaway when things went awry in our lives. Little kids don't know the word awry. We also went there just to hang out. It was our spot. We had found the treehouse one day when looking through the woods for buried treasure. We didn't find any treasure, but we did stumble upon the treehouse. We climbed up the ladder and viewed the place from inside. Reese called it a dump, but I saw the potential in it. I fixed her up, grabbing fold-up chairs, a rug, and a blanket to cover the only window in the wooden box to create the coolest treehouse ever. We kept our comic books, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and other miscellaneous knickknacks up there, 'cause fuck yeah, you gotta make space for your goddamn Yu-Gi-Oh cards. Now that I got the treehouse out of the way, let me explain to you who Reese is. Reese is my best friend. He moved in next door when I was in the 2nd grade. We went over their house and introduced ourselves. I went into Reese's room and saw that he had a Nintendo 64. Nice. We sat down and played Super Smash Bros. All day, and that first visit became a sleepover, which we spent staying up late playing video games till our eyes became sore and then some. Reese was a good kid. Sure, he'd get into trouble occasionally, like the one time he fed his sister's goldfish to the cat. What the?
Wow.
But he was overall a good kid. I don't think good kids feed their goldfishes to the cat. He'd get into trouble for sneaking out, and he constantly was a wise ass to teachers. But again, he was a good kid. And most importantly, he was my best friend. My only friend. That day, Reese was on the last day of his grounding. He was caught sneaking out at night. I was supposed to sneak out as well, but I got cold feet and stayed in bed. I'm sure he's like, fuck you, kid. I feel like if your friend gets in trouble for doing something you were also supposed to do, it's like,
you traitor.
Right? Reese went to the treehouse alone, and when he realized I wasn't there, returned home where his parents caught him trying to sneak back in. Reese would always tease me, clucking and calling me a chicken when I did stuff like this. I was sure that once he got loose from the confines of his room, he'd be all up in my ear about it. I entered the woods and was making my way to the treehouse. I was about 3/4 of the way there, swinging a stick I found a while back, pretending it was Excalibur. It was a black hole, the size of a bowling ball, levitating at eye level a few feet away from me. It looked like someone took a picture and hole punched it, leaving a black spot in its place. I approached it curiously. I tried to go around it to get a side view of the thing, but it disappeared. I walked behind where it would have been, and it reappeared. The hole was paper thin and couldn't be seen from its sides. I looked at it intensely, trying to see anything inside. I looked down at Excalibur and lifted it upwards. I slowly inserted the stick into the black hole. Suddenly, like a vacuum, the hole absorbed the stick, forcing me to let go. I fell backwards on my rear end, kicking my legs out and skittering back in a feeble attempt to create distance between the black hole and me. I breathed heavily as I stared at the hole in astonishment. Then the stick spat back out and fell at my feet. So, I'm assuming it looks kind of like one of those cartoon black holes that you just stick anywhere, like in a...
You can peel it off the wall and
like the Roger Rabbit. Have you ever seen that?
Yep.
Yeah, just like that. I was frozen in place for a good minute. I didn't know what to do. Then I had an idea. I ran over to a tree and grabbed an acorn off the ground. I went up to the hole and chucked the acorn in. I waited a minute, then the acorn came out, whizzing past my head. "Whoa," I said. That's when I had another idea. I went home and grabbed the football from my bedroom, just in case my dad decided he wanted to play catch with me. I brought it to the black hole, got into throwing distance, stretched my arm backwards, winding up the shot, and then threw. Of course, I missed the hole completely. I ran and grabbed the ball, got closer to the hole, and threw it underhand. This time, it went in. A minute passed, and then the ball popped right back out and bounced a few times before it rolled up close to me. I smiled and prepared another throw. I got into the stance, stretched my arm backwards, and chucked it as hard as I could. This time, the ball went in, no problem. A minute went by, and I just stood in front of the hole. The ball suddenly came out fast, spiraling and hitting me dead in the stomach. I fell to my knees in shock and pain. I wasn't expecting it to come out that hard. That's when I realized that it all depended on the strength of my throw.
You can catch a wrench, you can catch a ball.
Oh my God. If I throw it weakly, the hole would toss it back with the same momentum. Throw it hard, and it comes back hard. I played catch with the black hole for a good hour, then made my way home. I couldn't wait to show Reese. The next day arrived. It was Sunday, so after Reese got back from church, I was ready to show my friends the coolest thing ever. When my friend got back home, I quickly ran over to his house and asked his parents if he could hang out. They said of course, and we went to the treehouse. "Dude, I have something amazing to show you," I said, hyped for my friend to see my cool find. Yeah, sure you do," he responded. We walked about 3/4 of the way and started to approach where I'd seen the black hole. That's when Reese spotted it. "Whoa, what the hell is that thing?" "It's a portal," I eagerly said. We looked at it for a good minute and then made our way closer. "Throw this into it," I said, in a creepy way, apparently, unable to hold back the excitement in my voice. I handed him the football and he brought his arm back and threw it in on his first try. I was a little envious, but I had to remember that Reese played baseball, so his aim was going to be better than mine. "Now what?" he asked. "Just wait." A minute went by, even though it felt like an eternity, and the ball finally popped back out and landed on the ground in front of Reese. Reese didn't say anything for a moment, then knelt and picked up the football. He scrutinized it carefully, looking for any scruffs or nicks on the ball. "That was pretty amazing," he said in a monotone. I smiled, grabbed the ball back from him, and threw it into the hole once again. We played for a good 30 minutes. At first, Reese wanted to know how many things could go through the hole. He threw rocks, acorns, and even a worm into the hole.
Ew.
Wormhole. Get it?
Wow.
All came out just like they had before. Then we took turns tossing the football into it.
Pause. How long until they decide one of them's going through this fucking hole?
I don't know.
They tried it on a living thing already. That would be where my head would go because I'm stupid. I'd be like, I wonder if I could go through and see what's on the other side.
"What's on the other side?" Reese finally asked. "I don't know. Space stuff?" "What if there's like a whole nother dimension on the other side of it? Maybe there's an alternate version of us." I tossed the football into the portal again and waited for its reemergence.
Write a note on the football.
Yeah, I guess it's possible. "Aren't you at all curious what's on the other side?" I thought for a moment. Yeah, I guess I am a little curious. Well, what? I asked, confused. Stick your head through the portal.
Knew it.
No way, I said, backing up as if to say no with my body. Come on, don't be a chicken like you were the other night. That's fucking peer pressure, and no one needs that in their life. Cut it out.
She's Michelle Tanner now.
There it was, the chicken comment. I knew it was coming. I don't care what you said. I'm not doing it. I said, not letting peer pressure get the best of me. You go. Every time he pressured me into doing something, we always ended up in trouble. That's when he began to cluck, bending his arms into his torso to resemble chicken wings. Chicken, 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 he chanted. Kids are awful, dude.
They are.
Look, I'm not doing it. You don't know what could be on the other side. What if there's a monster or something? Come on, man, it's just a portal. Don't you want to know who's been tossing the ball back through it?
Just a portal, something mankind's never explored before in their entire civilization.
I didn't think about that aspect of it. I guess there could have been someone on the other side catching the ball and then tossing it back to us, but I still didn't budge in my decision. Pussy, he finally shouted. Also, don't call people that. Rude. Which hit hard. He'd never called me that before. I didn't even know what the word was in his vocabulary. I knew the word too, but I'd never dare say it. He began to walk toward the portal, and I shouted to him, "What are you doing, Reese?" "I am going to look through the portal." I quickly followed him, trying to explain that it was a bad idea, but he wasn't having any of it.
Stick your arm through with your cell phone on record, then get your video and pull your arm back through. That way you only lose an arm and not a head and a cell phone.
You can't pull it back through if he chops your arm off.
That's why I just said you'd only lose an arm and your cell phone.
Look, you can't be a chicken your whole life. You gotta take chances sometimes. Plus, I want to know who or what's been on the receiving end of our passes, don't you? I guess, but I don't think it's safe to just poke your head into things you don't understand. He bent forward to stick his head into the hole. He hesitated at first, but maybe to take in what he was about to do, then plunged his head into the hole. A few long seconds passed by and nothing happened. He just stood there, arms limp at his sides, looking through the hole. I looked around nervously, like we were doing a bad deed, and I was on watch. Then everything happened at once. Reese fell backwards, hitting the ground hard. I stood right behind him and was hit by something warm and wet, as if someone sprayed me with a super soaker with hot water. I looked down at the ground. He was missing his head. His neck leaked copious amounts of blood all over the place. That's when I realized that I was covered in blood. I screamed a scream only a kid could make. Then something flew out of the portal and I instinctively caught it as it slammed into my chest. I looked down at the thing in my hands and screamed again. It was Reese's head.
You can catch a head, you can catch a ball.
It was Reese's head. His face was twisted in horror like he'd just seen a ghost. His tongue lolled to the side and his eyes were glazed over, a white milky film covering his barely visible pupils. Memories started flooding into my head. Thoughts of the times Reese and I would play hooky from school, the times we'd sneak out and would tell scary stories to each other in the treehouse, trying to make the other piss his pants. All the fond memories I've ever had of Reese came together all at once and were shattered with one new horrifying mental scar. My hands began to tremble and I dropped Reese's head to the dirt and ran away. I kept running till I made it home. I opened the door and slammed it right behind me, then ran to the restroom to wipe Reese's blood from my face. I spent a half an hour scrubbing Reese's blood from my face and another scrubbing the blood off my clothes.
You run and you find an adult and you say something got Reese. You don't destroy the evidence because they're going to think somehow you did this.
I walked out of the restroom and ran up the stairs to my bedroom. I got into bed even though it was only 6 o'clock and laid there mortified. My eyes were wide open, looking straight at the ceiling, staring into space. The image of Reese's body dropping to the ground and his head landing in my arms kept playing over and over in my head. Then, after hyperventilating for a good 10 minutes, I fell asleep. My dad woke me up. I opened my eyes and thought to myself, that was one weird-ass dream. But my father knocked me out of that when he asked if I knew where Reese was. Apparently he didn't come home and his parents thought that maybe he was over here. They filed a missing persons report the next day, thinking that maybe Reese had run away. After a few days went by, the police decided to do a search of the woods. They spread out and found his decapitated body on the woodland floor. Local news played the story everywhere. They were looking for his killer and asking if anybody had any information and that they should call the local police department. I picked up the phone a few times, mostly to clear my conscience witch was eating me alive, but I didn't because I knew no one would believe me. Who would? Hey, my friend stuck his head through a portal and it bit his head off. Yeah, I'm sure that would be taken seriously. After all this time, one question remains with me, though. What did my friend see on the other side of that portal? Obviously a monster that chomped his fucking head off.
Okay, so before I jump into...
Or what if it's a sword that just was like, shink?
My thoughts, credit to Nicholas Gray, who wrote this one. It's excellent. My thing with this is how it ends. I think it's great. Start to finish, I think it's fantastic. But the way it ends, they find the body. Where did the portal go? Is the portal still there? Did they discover the portal? Like, why is the portal suddenly something that is just completely missing from this story?
Well, it wasn't there the whole time before. That was the first time he had ever seen it, and he makes that walk to the treehouse all the time.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, did it disappear, or did they discover the portal with the body and didn't mention it? You know, because then if someone calls in and says, my friend's head got taken off by a portal, you know that person was there, because you know they discovered this random crazy portal that I'm sure the government would have a tent around, or something like that. But yeah, really fucking good. I would guess... behind that portal was a guillotine. They're just convincing people to put their head through it. So as soon as you put your head through it, it just chopped your head off. There's just so many more things you could have done without sticking your head through. But it's a kid. Kids are dumb. And yeah, it didn't work out. I think that one kid was smart for just not getting peer pressured into doing something absolutely batshit crazy. You're absolutely right about that, Robin.
It's definitely some type of creature. Like it has to be some type of alien creature on the other side. You know what I mean? What else
Does
could
it have
be?
to be alien? It couldn't just be like some crazy person on the other side of the world.
I just imagine
that developed portal technology.
True. It just seems like something an alien would do. Black holes, you know.
But how would they know to throw the ball back? How would they not think that ball was some sort of grenade that was being thrown in?
Good point.
Or seed. It would look like a big seed almost, but either way, solid story, good stuff, good way to end the show. Good pick, Robin.
Thanks. Thank you, everybody who's gotten to this point of the episode. Thank you for listening. We hope you folks enjoyed these amazing stories these talented writers have written. Definitely creepy, definitely scary. Hope you folks enjoyed them. I definitely enjoyed reading them because I was that kid in school who's like, I want to read out loud. You know? Were you that kid?
Sometimes I was, and sometimes I'd be embarrassed. It just depended on like the class I had. And,
okay.
But yeah.
Yeah.
I liked reading.
Whenever they were like, okay, who wants to read the next page? I'd be like, me! I wanted to be the one that read.
We played Popcorn Lee. We had a friend in high school in junior year who was not very good at reading. So we would be like, hey, can we play popcorn? We used to play that in school where you read and then you say popcorn so-and-so at any point in the sentence. You'd popcorn to someone else to make sure they're paying attention.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. And we played Popcorn Lee. So the thing was everyone had to say Popcorn Lee. So I would read and say Popcorn Lee and it would go to Lee. And then he would read and popcorn at someone else. And they'd popcorn it back to Lee. And by the end of class, he was so fucking good at reading everything. It was awesome. And our teachers were like, I can't believe you did that to him. That's so mean. I was like, have you heard how he reads now? He's a fucking genius. You're welcome. We did your fucking job for you. Anyways.
Yeah. So I hope you folks enjoyed our reading because maybe I'll get good at reading if I do this enough.
You are way better than me this episode. I had so many mistakes this episode. You crushed it.
Yeah, so thank you, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you folks want to support the show, how can people do that?
So if you want to support the show, you can go to patreon.com/scarishpodcasts. Those are monthly donations. They come out when you sign up, and then at the beginning of every month thereon. There are different tiers you can sign up for. The lowest tier is a $1, and you get ad-free episodes at a $1. At the $3 level, we have a Choose Your Own Adventure tier where you can pick topics for us, like the live episode we did on Sunday, which was very fun, and thank you to all our patrons for that. And tiers after that gradually increase all the things that you get, including a merchandise tier, which Robin sends out a bunch of wonderfully handmade and hand-curated content. So check that out at patreon.com/scarishpodcast. If you're not a fan of monthly donations and just want to say, hey, I just want to give you some and then, not again, or you just want to do the monthly thing, you can go to ko-fi.com/scarishpodcast, do donations that way. All the donations we get go to upgrading our studio setup. We're able to make the production better. We are able to find ways we can finance new things that we basically turn into Scarish merchandise. We put all of it back into the show. And the way that we have been able to increase the production level of the show and get more merch and get all these other things is because we reinvest the wonderful money that you folks have invested into us, and we sincerely appreciate it. They are always welcome. They're always appreciated. So I think that's the best way I can do that since Robin decided to let me do that this time.
Yeah,
so good
thank
stuff.
You. Good job. if you folks have creepypastas or like fictional horror stories that you've written, please email us at
Pastatime
at scarish.com. Let us know that it is one of the fictional stories. If you have an actual encounter, personal, or a family member has a supernatural, paranormal, true crime encounter, feel free to share it at storytimeatscarish.com as well. We also have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that fun stuff.
Facebook is facebook.com/scarishpodcast. Twitter is at scarishpod, and Instagram is at scarishpodcast. Okay, good stuff. Good episode. Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you so much, everyone who listened. Thank you so much, everyone who watched. We sincerely appreciate all of you. We love you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Robin, go ahead and do that thing you do and sign us out.
I love that movie. Keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.